It's kind of weird because Jake Paul is extremely bigger than Tank. And I mean, but with it being a exhibition, it makes sense.
I'm gonna start like this. First of all, if you're a boxer and you're not taking note or notice of what Jake Paul is doing, you're worried about criticizing his boxing skills, then you're the fool.
Jake Paul versus Tank Davis. They just announced the fight. What's your instant reaction to that?
I don't know what's going to happen with a 135-pounder going up against a 200-pounder. I think it's not a real fight. Jake just too big.
When two of boxing's most polarizing figures, YouTuber turned boxer Jake Paul and pound-for-pound dynamo Gervonta Tank Davis, are finally set to meet, legends of the sport are already placing their bets. Tank enters with knockout power, surgical speed, and experience against elite competition, while Paul carries the weight of public expectations and outsized fights. Many icons foresee Davis asserting his usual dominance using precision and movement, but others argue that Paul's height, reach, and his knack for upsetting the odds could make it the shocker of the year.
You know what? Fair play. If he does go out and fight Anthony Joshua, which I wouldn't advise because that would be extremely dangerous, then fair play if he was to do that. And all the critics and people like myself would have to shut the hell up because I always said he's looking for fights that were manufactured, looking for fights that were predetermined. And by that, I don't mean fake fights. I don't mean fixed fights. I mean fights where the odds are so stacked in his favor that, of course, he's going to win. And, of course, we see this. The latest match that's going to go down November 14th at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia. Jake Paul is taking on, you've seen it by now, Gervonta Tank Davis. A man that is a lightweight in boxing. Now, lightweight in MMA is 155 pounds. Lightweight in boxing, 135 pounds. Jake Paul, I think when he weighed in for Mike Tyson, was 227 pounds.
Official weight, 227.2 pounds.
That is, if I'm not mistaken, a 92-pound weight difference. Almost a 100-pound weight difference. It's insane. Let's say he comes in at 200 pounds. It's still a 65-pound weight advantage, which is absolutely ridiculous. How can you be out there claiming to want to fight the best people on the planet and then going out there and taking on a guy that is maybe 92 pounds heavier, that is at least 65 pounds heavier than you? That is called one thing. That's called being a bully. It was bad enough when he fought Mike Tyson, a man that was 58 years old, and he was walking around like, oh, I just beat the best man on the planet. I just destroyed Mike Tyson and went out there and I beat him, and him and his brother are all celebrating and shit like that. It's like, dude, what are you doing?
Meanwhile, the location of the fight has been changed. Instead of Atlanta, Jake Paul will face Gervonta Davis on November 14th at Kaseya Center in Miami. MVP tweeted, "The war is no longer in Atlanta. Jake Paul versus Gervonta Tank Davis are taking over Miss Me. Same date, same fight, new city." The bout will be streamed globally on Netflix. And while many are calling it a spectacle, official announcements describe it as an exhibition. Behind all the talk is a dramatic size disparity. In his most recent fight, Paul weighed in at roughly 199.4 pounds, fighting at cruiserweight. Davis, by contrast, has been competing at around 135 pounds in his last few bouts. Because of that difference, Davis's WBA lightweight title will not be at stake in this fight.
Boxing fans are losing their minds over this Jake Paul versus Tank Davis fight. And honestly, can you blame them? Why would Tank agree to this? I mean, look at the graphic. Jake is 6'1", 199 pounds with a 6'4" wingspan. Tank, 5'5", 133 pounds, a 5'7" wingspan. Tank fighting me would be a fairer matchup. We're basically the same size. And you wonder why fans think Jake's fights are rigged? Because every time we see some nonsense like this, it feels like WWE with boxing gloves. Here's the kicker though. Jake threatened to sue anyone who calls his fights rigged. Yeah, you know, the same guy who preaches freedom of speech now wants to ban opinions. After that clown show with Mike Tyson that left everyone scratching their heads. Maybe, and I'm just throwing it out there, if your own management company wasn't promoting and sponsoring your fights, fans might actually believe what they're watching. Until then, don't be mad that people are skeptical. Be mad that your boxing career looks more like a scripted reality TV show.
Even though the exact terms of the fight are not fully clarified yet, there has been no publicly confirmed contract weight, number of rounds, or full details as to whether it will adhere to standard professional rules. Many observers view the fight more as a crossover event or entertainment spectacle than a conventional title bout, fueling debate about fairness, safety, and the integrity of boxing's weight class system.
Tank is not the guy that knows how to sell a fight. Tank cannot sell a fight in his own division. You have the Paul brothers and they come over to boxing. Their idea from day one is we don't have the skills or the experience. What we're gonna do is we'll take on the absolute best guys, but they're gonna spot us some pounds. Tank has one job to do, that it doesn't make any difference, that boxing is a real sport. My skills versus your skills, of which I am an abundance of and of which you have none of. Tank is telling anybody that will listen that there's a size problem. My skills and my experience in boxing, I do not have to wonder who's in the bar tonight. Any bar I go to, I rule the bar. No, it turns out that you don't. Just need some big guy to corner you, apparently. Boxing has never stood its ground. Boxing has never been able to explain why Floyd needed a half hour to get rid of a guy who's never boxed before. Tank Davis has already began this. When you choose a dum-dum, don't be surprised when he goes out and acts like a dum-dum.
Crawford views the upcoming bout between Paul and Davis with skepticism, largely because of the size mismatch involved. He considers the fight to be more for spectacle than true competitive merit, suggesting it resembles a sparring session dressed up as a fight. Although he acknowledges Davis as a highly skilled and explosive fighter with serious boxing credentials, if it's true that Jake Paul's larger frame gives him an edge, if Paul connects cleanly, the fight could swing abruptly in his favor. Yet Crawford does not seem convinced that the contest will play out under typical professional standards. He repeatedly emphasizes that the weight difference undermines the legitimacy of calling this a fight between equals.
Jake Paul versus Tank Davis. They just announced the fight. What's your instant reaction to that?
I don't know what's going to happen with a 135-pounder going up against a 200-pounder. I think it's not a real fight. Jake just too big. Tank ain't gonna be able to get in from that jab. Jake land one good punch on Tank, it's over with.
Shakur Stevenson, himself undefeated and highly regarded, sees the Paul versus Davis matchup as an unfair test, especially for Davis, because Paul is significantly bigger. Even so, Stevenson believes that Davis's experience, technical skill, and ring intelligence would allow him to dominate the fight in a manner that looks easy. He expects Davis to rely on movement, precision, and boxing fundamentals rather than trying to outpower Paul. Stevenson doubts Paul has the boxing refinement to overcome Davis's speed and IQ, and he thinks it is unlikely Davis would try for a knockout, instead aiming for a decision win. While Stevenson criticizes the spectacle aspect, seeing it as disrespectful to boxing if Davis pursues this kind of mismatch, he remains firmly convinced that Davis is several levels above Paul in pure boxing ability.
This case here, when you've got what is like a 70-pound difference between these two guys.
I mean, size will play some part of the fight, but if I'm thinking like I'm Tank, I'm probably just going to go out there and try to outbox him and use my knowledge and IQ against him. So, I can see Tank just outboxing him and making it real easy.
Is there any way you could, any realistic or legitimate way in your mind you could see Jake Paul winning a fight against Tank?
No.
No way.
Nope.
Not a lot of people have talked about Jake and said he's got good power. Not even and I get anything could technically happen, but you don't even see a realistic shot where he could land one big punch and Tank being so much smaller, he just can't handle the power.
Nah, not at all. I think Tank is he's been boxing his whole life. He's been boxing since a kid, so I doubt like that's gonna be an issue or problem. I think Jake is good for where he's at, but I think it's just levels.
What do you think about the rumors of Tank and Jake fight?
Man, Tank disrespectful to the sport if he choose that over fighting with me. I'm the best fighter in the sport. I've been telling him that. He called cap on it. So if you gonna call cap and say I'm not who I say I am, come prove it. I think it's dangerous for him to go back in there and fight Lamont. I think Lamont is a hell of a fighter. I can see that going left. So he better be on his A game.
Daniel Cormier takes a more nuanced view on this fight. He gives Jake Paul credit for wanting to step into the ring with someone of Davis's caliber, recognizing the risk and reward intertwined in such a fight. At the same time, he is critical of how mismatched the fight appears due to the weight differential, but he stresses that it is difficult to view the contest as fair in conventional boxing terms. Cormier emphasizes that Davis is clearly the more accomplished boxer in terms of skill, experience, and pedigree, which means Paul is placing a lot on the line. He also reflects on what a loss would mean for each fighter. For Paul, it could damage his credibility. For Davis, losing to someone much larger could carry reputational damage. Though Cormier does not strongly predict who will win, he leans toward Davis based on boxing merit, while acknowledging Paul's size makes this bout unpredictable.
I swear to God, I was on a plane coming home from Las Vegas. When Luis told me Gervonta Davis is fighting Jake Paul, I said, get the bleep out of here. I said, you're a bleep liar. Jake Paul is fighting Gervonta Tank Davis. There's one problem. He fights at 135 pounds. Gervonta Davis is that much better than Jake Paul at boxing. But Gervonta Davis in his last fight weighed 133.8 pounds. And I'm not over here in the business of just crapping on Jake Paul. I am much more respectful of what he's starting to build as a professional boxer. You're fighting a guy that's better than you. He's just much smaller. But that guy, because he's better than you, what if he wins? Everything Jake Paul has done is wiped completely out. Gervonta Davis loses to Jake Paul. Obviously, it's going to hurt who Gervonta Davis is. But he lost to a guy that's going to be upwards of 70 pounds bigger than him when he steps into the boxing ring. But I will tell you this right now, without a shadow of a doubt. I will watch this. Tank Davis is 30-0-1. You want to talk about Jake Paul fighting a real boxer? That's a real boxer. You can't make this stuff up, man. It's true. They're fighting.
Teofimo Lopez describes the Paul versus Davis matchup less as a battle for titles or pride, and more as a showcase, one driven by spectacle and profit rather than legacy or rankings. He points out that there's no shame in that since both fighters stand to earn massive paydays, and the allure of mainstream attention is guaranteed. Although this fight might not carry the prestige of a championship fight, Lopez believes it still offers value. By drawing in non-traditional audiences and generating buzz, even an exhibition-style bout can serve boxing. It can spotlight the sport to new fans, expand its reach, and remind people of how big boxing can be when personalities, dramas, and showmanship are all part of the deal.
And I'm actually very happy for Gervonta and Jake. I really am, man. It's good for the sport in some way, you know?
So a heavyweight versus a lightweight.
Yeah.
You got a fly hit me, yeah. A heavyweight versus a lightweight. How's this going to work?
Hey, they make it work. It's an exhibition for a reason. So, you know, they know what they're doing. And, you know, shout out to Netflix and shout out to both of them, honestly. Like I said, I think a lot of people in the boxing world are kind of upset. I could care less. I think they're going to go out there and make their money. It falls on the number 8 for a reason. They're going to make a lot of money.
Have you got a prediction for that fight?
My prediction? A show. A show.
Well, clearly it's a show, but when you've got a lot of people underestimating Jake Paul once again, but when you've got a heavyweight boxer who knows how to throw punches and knows the basics against a lightweight, it's quite a difference. I mean, have you sparred heavyweights before?
Yeah.
For competitive sparring in the ring?
Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same, not at all. Definitely got to move. I've actually played around a few times, went through between their legs just to duck around. But yeah, because they're taller, you know. But I think for that competition, that fight, it reminds me a lot like Big Show, The Big Show, and Floyd Mayweather when they fought in WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And will that end the same way?
Possibly. Maybe some brass knuckles in there too.
Can you see Jake Paul knocking out Gervonta Davis?
It's boxing, man. And if it's a show like this, anything goes, anything happens. You know, we expected Mike Tyson to do something, didn't go out that way. Jake Paul's training very hard, so, you know, kudos to both guys. I'm not going to critique them.
Promoter Eddie Hearn echoed a similar sentiment, but took it a step further. He argued that boxing and entertainment must be clearly separated, and a fight between Gervonta Davis and Jake Paul blurs that line dangerously. According to Hearn, the contest is not competitive in the truest boxing sense. Instead, it is designed as a business venture, fueled by celebrity status and social media buzz. Hearn points to the glaring size disparity as evidence that this matchup isn't about testing skills on a level playing field. Instead, it is packaged as a spectacle meant to capture mainstream attention. Hearn acknowledged that, financially, the fight would be massive, attracting global interest and generating significant revenue. However, as a lifelong advocate for legitimate competition, he finds it troubling when fights are arranged primarily for commercial reasons rather than sporting merit. Still, Hearn admitted that from a promoter's perspective, the fight would be a good business day. It guarantees headlines, ticket sales, and pay-per-view buys, even if purists feel the sport's standards are compromised.
They always told us that it was, we were looking at that fight for February of next year, and they always said that there was a chance that Jake would fight in November. I think, wasn't I the one that broke Jake Paul against Gervonta Davis 6 months ago or something? I knew that they'd agree that deal. I didn't know they were about to announce it then. But I did know that they'd agreed that deal previously. So I don't like it, if I'm honest. I mean, I think we need to really differentiate between boxing and an entertainment concept. And that's what that is. It's a freak show. It's entertainment. It's a lightweight fighting a cruiserweight, with, I don't know, is it bigger gloves and certain minutes per round. I don't know what it is, but I understand the market and I understand this freak show shock kind of the world mentality of people potentially tuning in. Is that a step too far? Maybe. I mean, I hated Jake Paul against Mike Tyson, but it did massive numbers. I hate Jake Paul against Gervonta Davis. It'll probably do massive numbers. So that's when you really have to differentiate yourself between. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it isn't going to do good business. Now, whether you want to be involved with it is another kettle of fish. I don't want to be involved with it, but I do respect the fact that it's going to do big numbers. It's just not boxing. And I don't think we should promote it as boxing.
In the meantime, then, Eddie, where does that leave you with Anthony Joshua? Are you exploring other options for the end of this year, or are you still looking at that fight for the beginning?
Yeah, no, we're not interested in the Jake Paul fight right now. After that, I mean, we're not going to wait around till November. Is it November or December, whenever it is? And
Rolly Romero offers a measured take on the Paul versus Davis matchup, stressing that Tank's standing in boxing is secure no matter what happens. As a multi-division world champion with major titles and hard-earned victories, Davis has already carved out a place of respect that wouldn't be damaged by a loss to Jake Paul. That said, Romero admits Jake's size is a real factor and notes that being naturally larger gives Paul a legitimate physical advantage. Still, he insists that Paul's build doesn't take away from everything Tank has achieved. The legacy, the titles, the respect among peers all remain Davis's regardless of the outcome.
But Jake Paul might be too big for him, or Tank might crack him. You don't know. Like I said, or as an exhibition, we don't know if they throw at each other or not, or we don't know. I don't know. I can't give an opinion because I don't know what's going on.
Do you think it impacts, will it impact Tank's legacy if Jake Paul were to beat him or even knock him out?
Dude, Tank's a 3-division world champion, 4-time 3-division world champion. At the end of it, bro, you can't take anything away from him.
Paulie Malignaggi highlights the critical distinction between experience and size. While Jake Paul has grown in popularity and physicality, Malignaggi insists that boxing experience outweighs brute strength. Gervonta Davis has fought on the biggest stages, headlined massive events, and faced elite competition. No matter how big Jake Paul is, he cannot match the years of training, ring IQ, and adaptability that Tank brings. Malignaggi's assessment leans on the idea that in boxing, skill and experience often decide outcomes over size alone.
I think Davis is more to lose because he's the bona fide world champion. I don't care if he's much smaller. I think Jake Paul has sort of plateaued as far as where his boxing is concerned. It's rather low level. Yeah. He's big, he's physical, he's strong, he can hit. So there is that risk. Davis, at lightweight, you're in a moment where it's too physical for you. You can clinch. Against the heavyweight, where you clinching? You ain't getting out of that corner just clinching anymore if you run out of space. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. But Davis, listen, there's a lot of talking points that I'm sure we'll get into when this gets closer to the fight. Davis can still punch at lightweight. Can he drop a heavyweight? There's a lot to gain there, right? If Davis knocks
the answer is yes.
If Davis drops Jake on his ass, as much as Davis is the one with more to lose, it's still a highlight moment.
A visual that will stay forever.
Yeah. But if you get dropped, even if you're smaller, you're still a world champion in multiple weight classes. If you get dropped, You know, what's the look? What's the feel? On the inside, as boxers, me and Chris Algieri, the champ, even you, Jimmy, you have fight experience, so we know that the risk is a big guy that big hits you. You're probably going down if you're a small guy if he hits you clean. So we know the risk, but how does it look to the public eye who don't understand that? You know what I mean? The public. So there is a lot to lose, though. There's a bit to gain. I wouldn't necessarily have an issue with this had Davis's career arc been one that benefited boxing. Davis was manufactured and put into a position where he's supposed to benefit boxing, and I don't think he has. I think he's hurt boxing. So by giving him this reward, that's my problem. Why are we watching this? Why don't you make him earn his spot that he still hasn't earned, mind you?
What do you think will happen in Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis? Will skill or size win? Drop your prediction in the comments.